The story begins not in America, but in blood, fire, and silence. In the early morning hours of Friday, October 13, 1307, the most powerful military order in medieval Europe was shattered in a single coordinated strike. The Knights Templar, once the guardians of pilgrims, bankers of kings, and masters of hidden wealth, were arrested across France by order of King Philip IV. Accused of heresy, idolatry, and secret rituals, they were interrogated, tortured, and executed. Their property was seized, their leaders were burned alive, and yet, as the smoke cleared, one question refused to disappear. Where did their vast treasure go? For centuries, historians have argued that much of the Templar wealth simply vanished before the arrests. Ships were said to have left the French port of La Rochelle in the days before the crackdown. Records ended abruptly, and from that silence emerged one of history's most persistent mysteries. Did the Knights Templar escape Europe? And if they did, where did they go? Among the many theories that followed, one stands above the rest in audacity and controversy: the claim that the Knights Templar crossed the Atlantic nearly 2 centuries before Columbus and left physical evidence of their presence in North America. Not myths or legends, but stones, carvings, symbols, and maps. Archaeological traces that, if authentic, would rewrite the history of the New World. The idea sounds implausible at first. Medieval knights sailing to America? Yet when stripped of Hollywood fantasy and examined carefully, the theory refuses to vanish. Instead, it lingers in forgotten chapels, weathered stones, strange inscriptions, and symbols carved into rock faces far from Europe. The question is no longer whether the idea is sensational, but whether the evidence, however disputed, deserves serious attention. To understand the possibility, one must first understand the capabilities of the Knights Templar themselves. They were not merely warriors. They were engineers, architects, bankers, diplomats, and sailors. The Templars owned fleets of ships, operated ports across the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts, and maintained trade routes reaching as far as England, Portugal, and North Africa. They financed crusades, handled royal treasuries, and developed early forms of international banking. This was an organization with the resources, secrecy, and logistical expertise to mount a transoceanic voyage, if the motive existed. And motive there was. After 1307, survival depended on secrecy. Some Templars found refuge in Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, himself excommunicated, ignored papal orders and allegedly sheltered them. Others merged quietly into new orders, such as the Portuguese Order of Christ, which later sponsored the Age of Exploration. Portugal, notably, became a maritime superpower in the following century, guided by men whose families and institutions had deep Templar connections. But escape alone does not prove transatlantic travel. For that, advocates point to physical evidence, objects and sites scattered across North America that appear to bear unmistakable Templar symbols. One of the most frequently cited locations is Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia. For over 2 centuries, Oak Island has been associated with a mysterious underground structure known as the Money Pit. Layers of logs, clay, coconut fiber, material not native to the region, and a stone inscribed with unknown symbols were reportedly discovered deep underground. While many dismiss the site as an elaborate natural formation or a failed treasure hunt, others argue that its engineering resembles European vault construction techniques known in the medieval period. Even more provocative is the proximity of Oak Island to ancient sailing routes and the presence of nearby stone markers that some interpret as navigational symbols. First recorded in the 19th century, the carving appears to depict a medieval armored figure holding a sword and shield. The proportions and equipment resemble a 14th century European knight rather than a Native American figure or colonial carving. Some researchers claim that the sword closely matches those used by Templars, complete with a distinctive pommel shape. Others argue the image is a natural formation enhanced by imagination and erosion. What keeps the Westford Knight alive in scholarly debate is not its clarity, but its context. Nearby are carvings that some interpret as Christian crosses and possible navigational markers. There is also the controversial claim that the area aligns with ancient surveying techniques, including astronomical markers used in medieval Europe. Skeptics counter that New England settlers could have carved the image centuries later, though no colonial record references such an act. Another controversial artifact is the Kensington Runestone, discovered in Minnesota in 1898. The stone bears a long inscription in what appears to be medieval Norse runes, describing an expedition by Scandinavian explorers in the year 1362, more than a century before Columbus. The text speaks of exploration deep into the continent and mentions deaths caused by conflict. While not directly linked to the Templars, some theorists argue that Norse explorers could have collaborated with or encountered Templar refugees, especially given the known Norse presence in Greenland and Newfoundland. Mainstream scholars remain divided. Some argue the runes contain linguistic anomalies inconsistent with medieval usage. Others counter that newer research suggests the language may reflect regional dialects not well documented. The stone sits in a gray area, neither fully authenticated nor conclusively debunked, much like much of the evidence surrounding pre-Columbian European contact. Moving south, in the caves of Oklahoma, researchers have documented inscriptions resembling ancient Old World scripts, including Phoenician, Iberian, and possibly medieval Latin forms. Known as the Heavener Runestone and nearby carvings, these symbols have sparked intense debate. While many archaeologists attribute them to Native American markings or natural scratches, others argue that certain inscriptions match known alphabets used by European sailors and traders long before Columbus. Perhaps the most intriguing claims involve maps, specifically the Piri Reis map of 1513. Created by an Ottoman admiral, the map depicts parts of the Americas with remarkable accuracy, including coastlines that were supposedly unknown to Europeans at the time. Piri Reis himself stated that his map was compiled from much older sources, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. If such ancient maps existed, who made them? And how did their knowledge survive into the early modern era? Some researchers argue that the Templars, through their extensive travels and secret archives, may have possessed ancient geographic knowledge inherited from earlier civilizations. The Templars were known to excavate beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and legends persist that they uncovered documents or artifacts of immense importance. While no physical proof of such discoveries remains, the secrecy surrounding Templar activities has left room for speculation. Then there are the symbols. Across North America, carvings resembling the Templar cross, distinct from other Christian crosses, have been reported on rocks, trees, and stones. In Arizona, New Mexico, and even parts of Canada, researchers have documented crosses with flared arms identical to those used by the Knights Templar. Critics argue that crosses are universal symbols and can appear independently across cultures. Yet supporters note that certain carvings include additional markings consistent with medieval European religious symbolism rather than indigenous designs. One site often mentioned is the Newport Tower in Rhode Island. This circular stone structure predates colonial records and has long puzzled historians. While commonly attributed to a 17th century windmill, some argue that its architectural features more closely resemble medieval European churches or watchtowers. Studies of its alignment suggest possible astronomical significance, including solstice markers. Though radiocarbon dating of mortar has supported a colonial-era construction, questions remain about whether the structure was built atop an earlier foundation. The strongest argument against Templar contact with America is the absence of uncontested archaeological proof. No verified medieval European tools, weapons, or remains have been excavated in secure, datable contexts in North America. Academic archaeology demands not just artifacts, but provenance, clear evidence of age, origin, and cultural association. Most Templar-related claims rely on surface finds, oral traditions, or sites disturbed long before modern excavation standards existed. Yet history is not only written by what survives, but also by what is lost. The Templars were experts in secrecy. If they did reach the New World, they may have intended to leave little behind. temporary settlements, hidden caches, and symbolic markers would align with an organization skilled in covert operations. Moreover, centuries of erosion, colonization, and development could easily have erased fragile evidence. It is also worth remembering that ideas once dismissed as impossible, such as Viking voyages to North America, are now accepted historical fact. For generations, Leif Erikson's journey was treated as legend, until archaeological evidence at Lonso Meadows confirmed Norse presence in Newfoundland. What changed was not the story, but the discovery of a single, undeniable site. So where does that leave the Knights Templar? Between certainty and speculation, between silence and possibility. There is no definitive archaeological proof that the Knights Templar came to America, no artifact stamped with an unquestionable seal, no settlement unearthed beyond dispute. But there is also no conclusive proof that they did not. What remains is a pattern of anomalies, stones that do not fit, symbols out of place, maps ahead of their time, and mysteries clustered along ancient maritime routes. Each piece alone is inconclusive. Together, they form a question that refuses to disappear. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Knights Templar is not hidden treasure or lost voyages, but the enduring reminder that history is incomplete, that power can erase records, that fear can silence truth, and that the past still holds secrets buried not just in the ground, but in the spaces between what we know and what we assume. Until a spade turns over a sword, or a stone yields an inscription beyond doubt, the question remains open. Archaeology has not yet answered yes, but it has never been able to say no. And sometimes, in history, that unanswered space is where the truth waits. ChatGPT can make mistakes, check important info,